Why would a loyal police dog block a plane full of passengers, refusing to move even as sirens screamed and the engines roared? What he uncovered moments later would shake the world to its core. Stay with us. You won't believe the miracle that followed. The morning at Rotterdam Europa International Airport broke under a silvery mist, the air dense with the quiet murmurs of departing travelers and the low hum of jet engines. At Gate 12, the crew of Flight RE 4523 prepared for the long haul to Toronto, led by Captain Alaric Voss. Alaric, aged 51, had the stern, weathered features of a man who had spent his life between earth and sky. His face, framed by steel-gray hair kept short in a military cut, was lined but not weary. There was a steady flame in his sharp blue eyes, a testament to decades of navigating both the turbulent clouds and the turbulence within human hearts. He moved with a composed assurance, dressed impeccably in his Navy uniform, brass buttons gleaming, the wings pinned to his chest like a badge of honor. Despite his calm demeanor, a deep scar ran through his soul. The loss of his younger brother during a reconnaissance mission had instilled in him a relentless need for control and perfection, both in the air and on the ground. Nearby, another figure walked the length of the tarmac, his steps purposeful yet shadowed by tension. Leonhard Weber, 38, a senior K-9 security officer, led his partner through the morning inspections. Tall and broad-shouldered, Leonhardt carried himself with the quiet discipline of a former soldier. His dark blonde hair, perpetually tousled despite his attempts to tame it, and a slight limp, remnant of an injury sustained during a peacekeeping mission, marked him as someone who had known both the cost of duty and the burden of survival. His olive-green uniform, adorned with a simple K-9 insignia, looked crisp, but his steel-gray eyes scanned every container, every movement, never quite settling. By his side trotted Cerberus, a magnificent 4-year-old German shepherd, his coat a regal blend of black and tan, muscles rippling under his thick fur. Cerberus was large even for his breed, with intelligent amber eyes that missed nothing. Bred from a lineage of champions, Cerberus was known not just for his strength and obedience, but for an uncanny intuition, a trait Leonhardt had nurtured through the countless hours of trust-building rather than mere commands. The sun was rising behind a curtain of low clouds when they reached the cargo area reserved for Flight RE 4523. The Boeing 787, sleek and proud, sat bathed in soft morning light, its engines purring like slumbering beasts. Cerberus sniffed along the pallets methodically, his tail low, ears perked. Leonhardt watched him carefully, familiar with every nuance of the dog's language. A flicker of hesitation, a single paw stopping mid-step, then suddenly Cerberus stiffened. His body coiled with tension, a low growl rumbled from deep within his chest, and without waiting for Leonhardt's command, he darted forward. In a flash, Cerberus positioned himself directly in front of the aircraft's nose, head high, stance immovable, teeth bared in silent defiance. Leonhardt's blood turned cold. "Cerberus, back," he ordered sharply, but the dog did not budge. Instead, he fixed his gaze unwaveringly on the cargo hold, his instincts screaming of unseen danger. Within seconds, ground crew workers gathered, confusion rippling through them like a gust of wind. Over the airport radios, clipped voices demanded explanations. The aircraft's engines were idling, passengers were beginning to board through the terminal gates, and flight operations was growing increasingly impatient. At that moment, stepping into the terminal, a woman paused, her senses tingling with the kind of intuition honed only by years spent chasing the invisible currents of truth. Helena Karsten, 32, was not a striking figure at first glance, her slender frame often swallowed by the practical genes, leather jacket, and woolen scarf she favored. But it was her face that lingered in memory. Sharp, angular features softened only by piercing green eyes, constantly darting, questioning, refusing to settle. Her long, wavy chestnut hair was tied loosely at her nape, and a subtle scar above her right eyebrow, a souvenir from covering protests in Eastern Europe, gave her an air of unspoken resilience. Helena had built a reputation in Berlin's media circles as a relentless investigative journalist, often described as too stubborn for her own good. Her latest investigation had led her here, following a trail of whispers about Aurumtech, a tech giant accused of covertly shipping experimental surveillance biotech under civilian radar. Just that morning, an encrypted email had landed in her inbox. The shipment is scheduled today, flight to Toronto. Watch carefully. Clutching her canvas messenger bag tighter, Helena joined the line to board flight RE 4523, but her eyes kept darting toward the tarmac where the scene was unfolding. A dog, a cargo plane, a delay, coincidence, she doubted it. Meanwhile, Captain Alaric Voss, having completed his pre-flight checklist, was informed over the radio of the disturbance. He frowned deeply. Flight operations, this is Captain Voss. Status of cargo clearance? Static. Then a hesitant reply. Captain, there's an obstruction. K9 unit refusal to clear the tarmac. Stand by. Alaric turned to his first officer, a young and eager aviator named Daniel Beck, whose freckled face was creased in a confused grimace. 26 years flying, never seen a dog stop a plane, Alaric muttered. But sometimes, Daniel, it's the smallest alarms we ignore that end up crashing the whole ship. Back outside, Leonhardt knelt beside Cerberus, speaking low and steady. What is it, boy? What do you smell? He trusted Cerberus more than he trusted most people. His mind raced through possibilities. Drugs, explosives, or something worse. Something sophisticated enough to fool electronic scanners, but not a dog's nose sharpened by nature itself. A flight supervisor in a neon yellow vest approached, his tone curt. Officer Weber, you need to clear the runway. We have schedules to maintain. Leonhardt straightened, meeting the man's gaze coolly. We have a problem, he said. This isn't a false alert. Cerberus doesn't make mistakes. Tension crackled in the air like a brewing thunderstorm. The airport ground director, Astrid Klein, arrived moments later. A woman in her mid-40s, Astrid had the stern, angular beauty of someone shaped by years and authority. Sharp cheekbones, a perpetual tight bun pulling her blonde hair back from a face made for decisive action. She listened intently as Leonhardt explained, her lips thinning into a line. Astrid was no stranger to bureaucratic pressure, but she also understood the stakes. After a terse moment, she turned to her radio. Lock down the cargo bay of flight RE 4523. Full secondary inspection. Now. From the terminal window, Helena snapped photos discreetly with her phone, her heart hammering in her chest. This was it. This was why she was here. Down on the tarmac, as inspectors and additional K9 units converged, Cerberus remained at his post, a silent guardian, a living barrier between the innocent above and the invisible threat lurking below. Overhead, the mist began to lift, and a weak shaft of sunlight illuminated the German shepherd's sturdy form, an unyielding shadow standing alone against a vast machine. Leonhardt placed a steadying hand on Cerberus's back. "Good boy," he whispered, knowing that whatever happened next, their lives, and perhaps the fate of many others, had already been changed by a loyalty deeper than instinct, sharper than technology, and more enduring than any steel forged by human hands. The engines of Flight RE 4523 wound down slowly as operations came to a halt. The battle for truth, still invisible to most, had just begun. The engines of flight RE-4523 hummed lowly in a restless purr as Captain Alaric Voss tapped the side of his headset, speaking into the mic with deliberate calm. "Flight Control, this is Captain Voss. I am requesting immediate hold status for Flight RE-4523 due to a security alert on the tarmac. Engines on idle. Passengers remain boarded, standing by for further instructions." His voice, roughened by years of cockpit announcements and storm briefings, cut clean through the static. Across the flight deck, First Officer Daniel Beck looked up from his console, concern flickering across his youthful, freckled face. Alaric met his eyes steadily, offering no reassurance, only the hard truth of experience. When something felt wrong, it usually was. Out on the tarmac, Leonhard Weber tugged gently at Cerberus's lead, the leather taut between them. "Come, boy, let's move," he urged under his breath. But Cerberus stood firm, his body vibrating with a low, almost imperceptible growl. Leonhard's fingers curled tighter around the leash, heart hammering against his ribs. A voice crackled through the earpiece clipped to his shoulder. "Officer Weber, you are ordered to remove your K-9 unit from the active tarmac immediately. Repeat, remove the obstruction." The voice belonged to Victor DeWitt, the Deputy Director of Ground Operations, a man known more for his rigid adherence to schedules than any real concern for safety. Victor, a broad, thick-set figure with thinning brown hair and a perpetual frown etched into his bulldog-like face, was making his way across the tarmac now, flanked by two junior security officers. He wore a reflective vest over his navy suit, an awkward combination that only made his aggressive gait more noticeable. Victor approached Leonhardt, his voice low and hard. "You're causing a scene. Get your mutt off my runway before we have a bigger problem." Leonhardt met his superior's glare, jaw tightening. "Cerberus has a reason. I trust him." Before Victor could snap a reply, a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the thickening tension. "Stand down, Deputy DeWitt." All heads turned as Astrid Klein approached, her polished boots clicking crisply against the tarmac. Today, she wore a charcoal blazer over her black uniform slacks, her golden hair pulled into a severe bun, giving her the unmistakable air of command. Her pale blue eyes, colder than the morning mist, appraised the scene with quick, clinical precision. She had built her career dismantling situations exactly like this, escalations born from pride instead of prudence. Victor stiffened but stepped back without argument. Astrid knelt beside Cerberus, her movements slow and respectful. She was not a woman who underestimated instinct, whether human or animal. "What do you see, boy?" she murmured. Cerberus's nose twitched violently as he barked once, short, sharp, commanding attention. Astrid rose, brushing dust from her knees. "We're halting the flight and inspecting the cargo hold. Full secondary clearance. Officer Weber, stay with your dog. Everyone else, secure the perimeter." Protests crackled across the radio network, a chorus of bureaucratic resistance, but Astrid was already issuing orders to the ground security supervisor and emergency response unit. Within minutes, yellow-vested officers surrounded the Boeing 787, while an airport maintenance truck positioned itself under the cargo hold, ready to assist the inspection team. Up in the passenger cabin, murmurs spread like wildfire among the rows of occupied seats. Seated by the window in row 22A, Helena Karsten pressed her phone tightly against her thigh, concealing it beneath her trench coat. Her pulse quickened. From her vantage point, she had recorded everything. The dog's refusal, the heated arguments, the security lockdown. She kept her posture casual, aware of the glances from the man beside her, a portly tourist lost in his own world of crossword puzzles. Slowly, with the ease of long practice, Helena drafted a short message on her encrypted app. "Incident confirmed. Possible cargo breach. Flight RE 4523. Need ID on shipment code ASAP. Attached to it was a blurred image she had snapped of the cargo manifest, partially visible through the cockpit windows during boarding. She hit send and waited. On the other side of the city, in a dimly lit apartment strewn with computer parts and paper-stuffed binders, Felix Morgenstern jolted awake as his secure laptop pinged. Felix, 35, was an odd tangle of contradictions. Wiry but strong, his sharp features framed by unruly ash-brown hair that seemed permanently one gust of wind away from chaos. His pale skin bore the marks of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled research marathons. His hooded gray eyes, magnified slightly by square glasses, flickered with sudden clarity as he read Helena's message. He had once been the rising star of Berlin's cybersecurity circles before an exposé he authored on corporate espionage had blacklisted him from every major tech firm. Since then, he had operated in the underground, a ghost, a fixer for the truth-seekers like Helena, who still believed in something as fragile and rare as integrity. Felix clicked open a secure database, his fingers moving rapidly. The cargo code Helena had sent was unfamiliar, but the shipping label, the internal reference numbers, and the routing information tripped warning bells in his mind. Digging deeper, he cross-referenced the code with a flagged list he had quietly compiled over the last 6 months, shipments tied to Oremtech. His breath caught. The shipment listed as electronic laboratory equipment was a cover. The internal routing flagged it as Subject F-Theta materials. Felix knew what that meant. Experimental biotracking modules, embedded with molecular camouflage designed to slip past traditional airport scans. Exactly what Helena had warned him about. Without hesitation, he encrypted a reply. Shipment linked to Oremtech clandestine ops. Classified as F-Theta, highly sensitive. Possibly illegal biosurveillance tech. Proceed extreme caution. Back at the airport, the cargo inspection team worked with painstaking slowness. Alaric, still seated in the cockpit, removed his headset and leaned back, watching the scene unfold. "This is bigger than a misloaded crate," he said aloud, more to himself than Daniel, whose boyish face was pale under the fluorescent cabin lights. Alaric's mind churned. He had flown humanitarian missions into war zones and smuggled out refugees under the cover of darkness. He knew the taste of danger, the scent of wrongness, and right now that bitter scent clung to everything. At ground level, a tall officer in a gray tactical uniform approached Astrid, saluting smartly. Officer Peter Kessler, head of Rapid Security Response, was a rigid man with a square jaw and the no-nonsense demeanor of a lifelong enforcer of protocol. His light brown hair was cropped close to his skull, and a faint scar ran down his left cheek, a souvenir from a cargo riot in Mumbai years earlier. "Director Klein," he said, "cargo bay access secured. No anomalies detected by surface scans. Awaiting your orders to proceed manual search." Astrid nodded once. "Open it." The hydraulic locks hissed and the cargo bay yawned open. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Stacks of luggage, electronic equipment crates, perishable goods, all tagged and sealed. But then Cerberus, still tense, pulled sharply toward a large silver crate secured near the rear. Leonhardt followed, his boots thudding against the metal floor. He knelt, examining the manifest attached to the crate. Laboratory equipment, destination, Toronto Medical Research Consortium. He exchanged a glance with Astrid, who gave a slight nod. Tools appeared. The team carefully pried the crate open. Inside, rows of equipment gleamed sterile under the flashlight beams. Oscilloscopes, precision sensors, vials of harmless-looking solutions. Yet Cerberus whined sharply, pawing at the lining of the crate. Leonhardt moved closer, peeling back the foam insulation, and froze. Embedded deep within the crate's structure was a second, shielded compartment, almost invisible to the eye. A compartment not listed on any manifest. Astrid's voice, cold and razor-sharp, broke the stunned silence. "Get me forensic inspection, now." High above, from her seat, Helena's phone buzzed. She checked the message from Felix, her mouth going dry. Below her, Cerberus barked once, sharp and insistent, as if sensing that they had only just scratched the surface of something vast and dangerous. The first confrontation was over. The real war was about to begin. The crate's hidden compartment opened under careful hands, revealing something far more sinister than any of them had dared anticipate. Nestled beneath layers of foam and carbon shielding were several compact microchips, housed in dull silver casings no larger than a thumbprint. To the casual observer, they might have passed for standard circuitry, but Leonhard Weber knew better. Even without specialized knowledge, the deliberate concealment spoke volumes. Cerberus lunged forward again, barking sharply, his teeth bared and hackles raised. His entire body quivered with the urgency of his discovery, the low growl vibrating through the tense air. Astrid Klein, maintaining her rigid composure, snapped her fingers at the forensic technician, a thin, hawk-nosed man named Dieter Holm, who had joined them from the airport's incident response unit. Dieter, mid-40s, wiry and sharp-eyed, wore the look of a man who trusted only what he could verify under a microscope. He moved with quick efficiency, sliding on nitrile gloves and producing a scanning wand. But when he swept the scanner over the chips, the device remained silent. No alerts, no irregularities. Dieter's brows furrowed. "They're shielded with a material that deflects standard scans," he muttered. "We'll need a deeper lab analysis." Astrid turned her pale gaze onto Leonhard, who knelt beside Cerberus, still holding the leash taut. "Your dog," she said, "just found something our machines can't detect." Leonhard nodded grimly. "He's trained for more than explosives and narcotics. We added experimental material scent profiles to his training after a government program flagged emerging threats last year. Synthetic compounds, bioengineered molecules. Cerberus can smell what technology can't see." Cerberus stood proud, panting slightly, amber eyes gleaming. His imposing figure, all corded muscle and focused intensity, looked almost statuesque against the background chaos of the cargo bay. There was something ancient about the way he worked, an echo of wolves circling danger long before humans named it. As Astrid contacted the Federal Security Bureau's Emergency Division, Alaric Voss remained seated in the cockpit, his mind gnawing at something unrelated to the cargo. His gaze drifted over the manifest list again, then down the passenger roster. A particular name, initially overlooked, now gnawed at his memory like an itch just out of reach. Matteo von Elst. Alaric's gut tightened. Matteo von Elst was no ordinary businessman. He had the polished charm of a high-flying executive, but to those who knew the hidden circuits of European corporate warfare, he was a shadow broker, a man in his mid-50s, always impeccably dressed in tailored charcoal suits with silver-streaked dark hair and a smile that never touched his pale, calculating eyes. Matteo's name had once surfaced in an obscure intelligence memo after a series of clandestine technology sales had come to light. Sales involving biosurveillance devices dangerously close to military-grade applications. Although no charges were ever filed, those in the know understood. Matteo moved between legality and crime like a ghost through fog. Down in the passenger cabin, Helena Karsten had reached a similar conclusion through a different route. After Felix Morgenstern's encrypted message warning about Tech's connection to the shipment, she had scoured the flight's VIP seating list. Spotting Matteo von Elst's name had made her heart jolt, and now she covertly studied him from a distance. Matteo sat near the front of the plane, reading a newspaper with exaggerated calm. His square jaw was clean-shaven, his posture relaxed, but Helena noticed the minute signs others would miss. The tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes flicked toward the windows every few seconds. Calculating risk, escape routes, Helena's fingers itched toward her phone hidden under her jacket. Her instincts screamed at her to gather evidence, but years of experience warned her against acting rashly. Instead, she carefully composed a short message to Felix. Von Elst confirmed on flight. Tech link probable. Monitoring. Will update. She encrypted it and sent it through a secured channel. Meanwhile, back on the tarmac, two black unmarked vans screeched to a halt beyond the security perimeter. A unit from the Federal Criminal Police Office, BKA, had arrived, their appearance heralded by a cascade of tension snapping down the spine of every officer on the ground. Leading them was Inspector Elias Roth, a figure who seemed cut from stone rather than flesh. Roth was in his early 50s, tall and powerfully built, with sun-weathered skin and close-cropped black hair turning to gray at the temples. His brown eyes, dark and impenetrable, missed nothing. Roth carried the grim gravity of a man who had spent too many years chasing threats hidden in plain sight. He approached Astrid Klein without preamble. Director Klein, situation report. Astrid, unflinching under the weight of federal authority, summarized the findings succinctly. Roth listened, his heavy brow furrowing deeper as the details unfolded. Finally, he turned to Leonhardt. "This dog is the reason we're here?" His voice carried no mockery, only a hard, skeptical curiosity. Leonhardt rose to full height beside Cerberus, nodding once. "Yes, sir, he's the only reason we found the hidden compartment." Roth studied the German shepherd for a long moment. Cerberus, sensing the scrutiny, lifted his head higher, gaze unwavering. Roth grunted, a sound halfway between approval and grim understanding. "Good dog." The forensic team moved into action, cataloging the chips under Roth's direct supervision. Alaric, leaving the cockpit temporarily, descended onto the tarmac to meet Astrid and Roth. His tall figure, sharply dressed in his pilot uniform, still carried the unmistakable air of old-world dignity shaped by years of military aviation. "We need to discuss one of the passengers," Alaric said without ceremony. "Matteo von Elst. He's on the manifest. I believe he may be connected to this shipment." Roth's eyes narrowed slightly. "How certain are you?" "Certain enough to warrant a closer look," Alaric replied. Inside the aircraft, Helena continued her careful watch. Matteo folded his newspaper, stood, and began moving toward the lavatory. Slow, measured steps that suggested a man weighing whether to flee or wait. Helena's pulse spiked. She rose casually from her seat, following at a safe distance. At the same moment, back at ground control, Roth issued new instructions. "Seal the aircraft. No one disembarks until we have authorization." Astrid relayed the command, and the boarding doors clamped shut with a final ominous thunk. Helena's phone buzzed softly. A message from Felix. "Confirmed. Matteo von Elst managed biotech sales linked to banned neural surveillance tech. Classified intelligence. Extreme caution." In the confined space of the aircraft, as passengers shifted uncomfortably and flight attendants whispered nervously among themselves, the game had changed. This was no longer about a suspicious shipment. It was about preventing something far more dangerous from slipping through their fingers. Leonhardt remained close to Cerberus as the BKA team continued their preliminary sweeps. Despite the chaotic swirl of agents and protocols, Cerberus's focus never wavered. His ears perked once more toward the aircraft as if he sensed the center of gravity shifting, pulling them all inexorably toward a confrontation that none could yet see fully, but that he, in his instinctive, primal wisdom, already understood. And somewhere, walking calmly through the rows of passengers, Matteo von Eelst smiled thinly, unaware that the hunter's circle was tightening around him. Dominic Strahl stared out over the glittering skyline of Berlin from his corner office at Aurumtech's headquarters, the city lights mirrored in the cold steel and glass of his domain. At 47 years old, Dominic had the sleek, contained look of a man who had weaponized charm into power. His short black hair was always immaculately styled, his jawline sharp beneath a meticulously groomed beard, his tailored charcoal suits exuding quiet authority. But behind his polished facade lurked a mind sharpened by decades of calculated ruthlessness. He knew that control, true control, was never about public perception. It was about staying invisible until it was too late to stop him. Tonight, as reports from Rotterdam Europe International flooded in, reports of a K9 unit discovering what was never meant to be discovered, Dominic's calm was a brittle veneer. His fingers tapped against the glass wall as he listened to his chief of covert operations, Lucas Berger, a grim-faced man with a shaved head and a jagged scar slicing across his left brow, a souvenir from a failed extraction mission years ago. Lucas, mid-40s, built like a battering ram, radiated a dangerous stillness. "They have the cargo," Lucas said, voice low, clipped. "We need to move." Dominic turned slowly. "The evidence?" "Still contained to the cargo bay, but the forensics team is thorough. It won't stay hidden for long." Dominic's pale blue eyes narrowed. "Then make sure it vanishes. Quietly. Tonight." Within the hour, a black van rolled through a restricted service entrance at Rotterdam Europa. Badges flashed to sleepy guards. Identities fabricated down to the last bureaucratic stamp. 3 men, dressed in airport maintenance overalls, exited quickly. Each bore the lean, hardened look of ex-military contractors, faces scrubbed of anything identifiable, eyes cold and scanning. Meanwhile, Leonhard Weber remained stationed near the grounded Boeing 787, Cerberus resting at his side but still visibly tense. The German shepherd's nose twitched, his ears pricking slightly toward the distant maintenance corridors. Leonhardt trusted that signal instinctively. He rose slowly, keeping a loose hold on the leash, murmuring low to Cerberus. Across the tarmac, under cover of darkness and routine, the 3 operatives made their way toward the security archives wing, a squat, heavily fortified annex containing days of surveillance footage. Their mission was simple: breach, wipe, vanish. One carried a magnetic pulse device hidden in a maintenance cart. The others held specialized demolition charges disguised as HVAC tools. Inside the passenger terminal, Helena Karsten sat at a corner table in a deserted coffee kiosk, fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. The glow from her screen painted her angular features in pale light. She had discarded the casual, guarded manner she wore for appearances. Here, in the flickering dark of clandestine research, she was entirely herself, razor-focused, relentless. Her connection with Felix Morgenstern crackled through a secure network. In his Berlin hideout, Felix hunched over his own workstation, pale and gaunt in the shifting light of multiple screens. The data he was decrypting told a story more horrifying than either of them had imagined. 12 separate international flights, all carrying hidden biotech cargo. A sophisticated web stretching from Berlin to New York, Toronto to Shanghai, Dubai to Sao Paulo, all traced back to Aurumtech. And Matteo von Elst's name intertwined like a spider at the center. Felix's voice came through her earpiece, tight with urgency. Helena, you need to be careful. If they find out how much you know—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Back on the tarmac, Cerberus stiffened beside Leonhardt, emitting a low warning growl. Leonhardt followed the dog's gaze toward the perimeter of the maintenance zone. His instincts snapped taut. Something was wrong. He keyed his radio, whispering urgently, "Control, Officer Weber. Possible unauthorized movement near the security annex. Request backup." His words cut off as Cerberus surged forward, nearly yanking the leash from his hand. At that very moment, inside the archives, the intruders were planting the pulse device against the main server rack. Their leader, a man with cold blue eyes and a jagged tattoo curling up his neck, checked his watch. They had exactly 90 seconds before the pulse triggered and wiped everything, but Cerberus was faster. Leonhardt released the leash with a shouted command, "Go, Cerberus!" The German Shepherd became a streak of muscle and fury, crossing the distance like a fired arrow. He crashed through the semi-open security door just as the first man turned. Too slow. Cerberus latched onto the intruder's forearm, driving him backward into a wall. The man screamed, the device he was holding clattering from his grasp. Leonhardt was seconds behind, drawing his service weapon, shouting, "On the ground! Hands where I can see them!" The second intruder lunged, but a warning shot into the floor froze him. Within moments, airport tactical units responded to the alarm Leonhardt had triggered moments before, flooding the annex with armed personnel. It was messy, but decisive. 2 intruders subdued, the third managing a narrow escape into the service tunnels, but with the crucial device left behind, inert and unactivated. The security footage remained intact. More importantly, so did the evidence. Back at her laptop, Helena hit send on a package labeled Aurum Tech International Exposure Phase 1. It was meant for a network of trusted independent journalists across Europe. A dead man's switch of sorts. But before she could confirm transmission, her screen flickered, then went black. A new message replaced her desktop, stark and chilling against the void. "Stop now. Final warning." Her heart pounded. She ripped out her USB tether, severing the connection, but it was too late. Someone had penetrated her encryption. Someone powerful enough to bypass the protocols Felix himself had designed. The coffee kiosk's lights overhead dimmed slightly. A chill crept up her spine that had nothing to do with the cooling night air. She closed her laptop with trembling hands, scanning the empty terminal. She was no longer alone, of that she was certain. She needed to move. Fast. In Berlin, Felix stared at his frozen screens, an uneasy knot tightening in his gut. Whoever was coming after them wasn't playing games anymore. Out on the tarmac, Leonhardt knelt beside Cerberus, murmuring words of praise into the dog's fur. Cerberus's chest heaved with exertion, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Once again he had found what no machine could detect, the creeping, invisible hand of sabotage. Leonhardt looked up at the stars faintly visible through the thinning mist. They had won a battle tonight. But the war was just beginning. And somewhere across the ocean, Dominic Strahl lifted a glass of fine whiskey, smiling grimly into the dark as he prepared his next move. Leonhard Weber moved swiftly across the tarmac under the dim wash of service lights, a thick folder of confiscated evidence pressed tightly against his chest. Beside him walked Captain Alaric Voss, his pilot's uniform jacket traded for a dark overcoat hastily grabbed from the flight locker, giving him the severe look of an off-duty officer or a man on a covert errand. Alaric's square shoulders and purposeful stride belied the turmoil in his mind. Years of navigating the skies had taught him many things, but dealing with clandestine corporate sabotage was not supposed to be one of them. At Leonhardt's side trotted Cerberus, his black and tan coat sleek under the fluorescence, his posture taut, head low, nostrils flaring. The dog's every muscle spoke of barely restrained vigilance. Despite the successful interception of the saboteurs, they both knew they were carrying a ticking bomb of truth, evidence that powerful forces would kill to erase. The plan was simple in theory. Move the secured evidence to an Interpol field agent stationed at the diplomatic wing of the airport. But as they reached the entrance to the underground tram tunnel, a service route normally used by baggage transports and emergency vehicles, Leonhardt's instincts screamed a silent alarm. Cerberus's ears pinned back, nose twitching frantically. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat. Leonhardt tightened his grip on the leash, signaling to Alaric with a sharp glance. In the shadowed mouth of the tunnel, a trio of figures loitered in unnatural stillness. Even from a distance, something was wrong. The stiffness of their poses, the slight shift of weight that betrayed more than casual standing. Men trained for violence. Not good, Alaric muttered under his breath, already scanning their surroundings for a way out. Leonhardt nodded curtly. Follow me, stay close, trust the dog. Without waiting for a reply, he veered sharply toward an adjacent maintenance corridor, Cerberus pulling slightly ahead, guiding them with an urgency that brooked no question. Their footsteps echoed softly off the concrete walls as they descended deeper into the artery-like service tunnels snaking beneath the airport. Behind them, the figures stirred, slipping into pursuit with chilling silence. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the sprawling complex of Rotterdam Europa, Helena Karsten leaned into a corner booth of a nondescript staff cafeteria, trying to blend in with a group of late-shift technicians sipping coffee. Across from her sat Dr. Emily Brandt, a woman whose very presence seemed to hum with barely contained tension. Emily, in her early 40s, wore a practical gray turtleneck under a loose black blazer, her hair an untidy cascade of dark curls pushed back from a pale, intelligent face. Deep lines carved around her mouth and eyes spoke of long hours, sleepless nights, and moral compromises she had been forced to swallow for far too long. Her thin frame looked fragile at first glance, but the steel in her posture betrayed a deeper strength, one born from years of fighting battles that no one outside her world even knew existed. "You understand the risk I'm taking, meeting you here," Emily said, her German-accented English precise and low. "I do," Helena replied steadily, voice pitched low, "and I wouldn't ask unless it was absolutely necessary." Emily hesitated, glancing around the cafeteria. Then she slid a small encrypted drive across the table beneath her hand, as casually as passing a sugar packet. "Everything you need to expose them is here," she said. "Proof that Aurumtech has been embedding neural micro-trackers in biological shipments, systems designed to interface with human neural networks without consent or detection." Helena's breath caught slightly. "This violates every international law on human rights and biomedical ethics." Emily nodded grimly. "And that's exactly why they're burying it. If this goes public, it will not just destroy Aurumtech, it could topple half a dozen government-backed research initiatives." Helena tucked the drive into an inner pocket sewn specifically for moments like this. "I can protect you. I have contacts who can move you somewhere safe." "You'll need to," Emily said, eyes flashing. "Once they realize this data is missing, they'll come for me first." Back in the tunnels, the game of predator and prey unfolded in ghostly echoes. Leonhardt led Alaric down a service stairwell into a dim tram station reserved for maintenance crews. Cerberus pulled sharply to the left, nostrils flaring with an intensity that left no room for doubt. Leonhardt followed without hesitation, motioning Alaric behind a rusted pillar just as the first of their pursuers rounded the corner above. Through the cracked concrete, Leonhardt could make out glimpses: black tactical boots, gloved hands gripping concealed weapons, faces obscured by airport security caps. Professional, efficient, likely mercenaries hired through one of Dominic Strahl's shadow networks. Leonhardt drew his sidearm, keeping it low against his thigh. "We needed distraction," he murmured. Alaric, always a man of action when it counted, scanned the maintenance platform. His gaze landed on an old emergency alarm box affixed to the wall. Without missing a beat, he ripped it open and triggered the manual override. A klaxon erupted overhead, red lights flashing madly, the tunnel filled with disorienting noise and strobe flashes. Cerberus barked once, a sharp tactical warning, then lunged ahead, leading them into a secondary access corridor shrouded in darkness. Their pursuers, momentarily thrown by the chaos, scrambled to reorganize. Leonhardt and Alaric moved swiftly, Cerberus their unfaltering compass through the labyrinthine service network. They emerged near a restricted baggage handling area, breath misting in the cold, oily air. Ahead, beyond a steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," lay the diplomatic wing. Their destination, and hopefully their salvation. But the steel door required biometric clearance. Alaric, thinking fast, retrieved a stolen maintenance badge from his coat pocket, a relic from his military days, when quick thinking and improvisation had often been the difference between life and death. He swiped it against the reader. The light blinked once, then turned green. They slipped through just as the pursuing footsteps grew louder behind them. Inside, a group of stunned airport security officers turned as Leonhardt, Alaric, and Cerberus burst in, weapons lowered but voices urgent. "Federal evidence transfer," Leonhardt barked, flashing his credentials. "Seal this section now. Full lockdown. We are under hostile pursuit." Though skeptical, the commanding officer, a tall woman with sharp features named Ingrid Smith, known for her no-nonsense demeanor and strict adherence to protocol, recognized the urgency blazing in Leonhardt's eyes. With a sharp nod, she ordered the blast doors secured. Heavy metal clanged shut, cutting off the tunnel behind them. Leonhardt sagged slightly, adrenaline draining. He knelt beside Cerberus, rubbing the dog's thick neck in gratitude. "Good work, partner. You saved us again." Across the airport, Helena hurried through the labyrinth of service halls, clutching Emily Brandt's data drive like a precious relic. She knew the clock was ticking. The forces aligned against them would not rest until they were silenced. But tonight, at least, they had survived. And they had struck a blow in a battle that was only just beginning. Far above them, Dominic Strahl reviewed the security alerts flashing across his private server. His lips thinned into a cold line as he issued a new command to his operations chief. "Accelerate the contingency. No more mistakes." The heavy doors of the European Interpol headquarters in Lyon swung open, swallowing Leonhardt Weber, Alaric Voss, and Cerberus into a cold, clinical world where secrets were currency. And every hallway hummed with urgency. The building, a modern labyrinth of glass and steel, loomed under a gray-dripping sky. Inside, officers in tailored suits moved with clipped precision, carrying files thick with the sins of nations. Leonhardt, still clad in the field-worn tactical jacket he had refused to replace after the tarmac chaos, moved with stiff wariness, the thick folder of evidence never leaving his gloved hands. Cerberus, the stoic German shepherd at his side, drew glances, some curious, some respectful, as the duo passed. The dog's massive frame, dark coat slick with recent rain, radiated the silent confidence of a creature who had faced down far worse than bureaucratic corridors. Waiting for them in a glass-walled conference room was Director Juliette Armand, a woman whose name had become both legend and warning within Interpol's ranks. In her early 50s, Juliette wore her age like a battle standard. Short silver hair framed a face of angular planes and keen gray eyes that could dissect lies as swiftly as scalpels peeled away flesh. Her navy suit was immaculate, her every movement economical, decisive. She greeted them with a curt nod, her voice a soft weapon. "Officer Weber, Captain Voss, thank you for coming so quickly." Behind her, a massive digital map lit up the room's rear wall, tracking dozens of international flights with ominous red lines converging across the Atlantic. Leonhardt handed over the folder without ceremony. "We believe this evidence connects Tech to multiple breaches of international security law. Illegal biotech transfers masked under fake cargo manifests. And," he glanced at Cerberus, who sat by his boots like a sentinel, "this dog's nose found what no scanner could." Juliet opened the file, her face betraying nothing as she flipped through photos, manifests, chemical analyses. Yet Leonhardt saw the faint tightening of her jaw, the mark of someone recognizing just how deep the rabbit hole went. She pressed a button on the table. A second figure entered. Dr. Adrian Morel, a forensic bioengineer in his mid-40s. Tall and thin to the point of gauntness, with dark, unruly hair and wire-frame glasses perched perpetually halfway down his nose. His white lab coat was stained with ink and faint traces of chemical reagents, and he moved with the distracted energy of a man whose mind was usually 3 steps ahead of the room. Adrian barely offered a nod before diving into the evidence, his brow furrowed deeper with every page. "These circuits, they're designed for more than just surveillance," he muttered. "This is full-spectrum neural interfacing. Hypothetically, these could monitor, potentially even influence, autonomous functions, emotions, decision-making patterns." Leonhardt's stomach twisted. Alaric, standing grim and silent beside him, felt the cold weight of it too. Control without chains, enslavement without prisons. Juliet closed the file sharply. "Effective immediately, a joint international investigation will be launched. Tech is to be treated as a high-level threat entity. Officer Weber, your actions and Cerberus's detection are the cornerstone of this case. You and your unit are being seconded to Interpol's Task Force Omega for the duration." Leonhardt exchanged a glance with Alaric, then dropped his hand to Cerberus's head, grounding himself. He had never sought attention, but if it meant stopping what he had seen, he would stand at the tip of the spear. Meanwhile, far from the gleaming halls of Interpol, Helena Karsten faced a far darker storm. She had returned to Berlin to prepare the first exposé article with the data Emily Brandt had provided. But before she could even type the first line, the assault began. Her press credentials were flagged for review. Anonymous complaints about her ethics flooded the Berlin Press Guild. Subtle threats flickered into her inbox, emails designed to appear as legal warnings, phone calls that disconnected the moment she answered. It was a cold war of intimidation, one she had fought before, but never with stakes this high. Helena, tall and wiry with the determined air of someone who had been underestimated her entire life, fought back the rising anxiety gnawing at her composure. She tucked her long chestnut hair beneath a plain black cap, donned an oversized gray coat, and moved through the city like a ghost, relying on old tricks to stay ahead of invisible pursuers. When she reached a small, nondescript safe house on the city's outskirts, Alaric was already waiting, leaning against a battered Peugeot, his coat soaked from the endless drizzle, his gray-streaked hair plastered to his forehead. His presence, calm and solid, grounded her frayed nerves. "You weren't followed?" he asked quietly. "Not today," she answered, slipping into the passenger seat. Inside the safe house, Emily Brandt sat at a battered wooden table, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. She looked even thinner now, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a chipped mug of coffee. "They're trying to destroy your reputation before you can even publish," Emily said, voice rough. Tech has reach into media watchdog groups, licensing boards, even the guilds that protect journalists. They want you silenced, discredited. Helena nodded grimly. Then we go faster, before they can finish the job. Alaric set a weathered briefcase on the table and opened it, revealing a stack of hard drives and a battered laptop hardened against cyber attacks. You're not alone anymore. We hit back with the truth. While Helena and Emily prepared the first encrypted transmission of documents to trusted international outlets, Leonhardt was pulled into a private debrief with Juliette Armand. She paced before the illuminated flight maps, speaking without looking at him. Our early analysis confirms your instincts. 12 flights over the past 8 months, all bearing similar clandestine cargo, all routed through cities where Tech has silent partner offices. Leonhardt crossed his arms. And Matteo von Elst? Confirmed coordinating shipments personally, Juliet said, her voice razor-sharp. Interpol has issued a red notice for his immediate detention, but he has already disappeared, vanished between Brussels and Madrid 3 days ago. We believe he's been pulled into Tech's inner sanctum. Leonhardt's jaw clenched. His gaze drifted to Cerberus, who sat calmly at the doorway, amber eyes watchful. They would need the dog again, more than ever. Juliet turned, her expression softening for the first time. I don't say this lightly, Officer Weber. Without you, and without that extraordinary animal, we would be blind right now. Leonhardt inclined his head. We'll see it through. Far away, in a private airfield shrouded in mist outside Zurich, a sleek black jet warmed its engines. Matteo von Elst, impeccably dressed as always, boarded with an unreadable expression. Dominic Strahl stood by the stairwell, his hands clasped behind his back. They're moving faster than expected, Matteo said quietly. Dominic smiled thinly. So will we. As the jet roared into the night, the battle lines of a global war no one had voted for, no one had seen coming, drew sharper. But so too did the determination of a few scattered souls willing to fight. And at the heart of it, a German shepherd named Cerberus, standing between humanity and a darkness hungry to consume it. The Grand Press Hall of Interpol's European headquarters had never felt heavier with history than it did that morning. Rows upon rows of journalists, government representatives, and security officials filled the room, their faces a sea of tension, curiosity, and barely restrained disbelief. Camera flashes blinked like nervous heartbeats beneath the gleaming glass chandeliers overhead. Along the stage, the Interpol insignia stood stark against a dark blue backdrop, flanked by flags of every major European nation. Leonhard Weber adjusted the collar of his formal Interpol dress uniform, feeling strangely alien in its stiff, precise folds. Beside him sat Cerberus, coat brushed to a glossy sheen. A polished service vest fitted across his strong shoulders, bearing the embroidered insignia of Task Force Omega. The German shepherd sat in perfect stillness, only the slight, rhythmic movement of his ears betraying his alertness. Leonhardt rested a steady hand on the dog's back, feeling the anchor of Cerberus's silent loyalty. Director Juliette Armand took the podium first, her presence commanding absolute attention. She wore a sharply tailored black suit that matched the gravity of the moment, her silver hair a crown of earned authority. Her voice, low and deliberate, rolled across the room like the first warning peal of thunder before a storm. Today, she began, Interpol confirms the existence of a covert operation utilizing civilian air transport networks to illegally move experimental neurosurveillance technology across international borders. This conspiracy, orchestrated by Tech Corporation and involving multiple complicit actors in the aviation and tech industries, represents one of the most severe breaches of international law and human rights standards in modern memory. A murmur rippled through the crowd, pens scratching furiously, camera shutters snapping. Behind Juliet, a large screen displayed detailed diagrams, images of the hidden biotech components Cerberus had uncovered, flight routes linking dozens of major cities, and names, so many names, now marked for investigation or arrest. Among them, Matteo von Elst and Dominic Strahl stood in bold red lettering. Juliet continued, her voice unwavering. Key to the exposure of this operation was the work of Officer Leonhard Weber and his K9 partner Cerberus, whose exceptional instincts and training led to the first discovery that broke the chain of silence. The spotlight swung onto Leonhardt and Cerberus. The room broke into spontaneous, thunderous applause. Leonhardt, unused to public recognition, gave a tight, modest nod, his hand never leaving Cerberus's shoulder. The dog tilted his head slightly, as if puzzled by the noise but otherwise serene. After the ovation subsided, Juliet awarded Leonhardt the Interpol Cross of Honor, pinning the silver star to his uniform herself. Cerberus was presented with a custom-forged medal attached to a sleek leather collar, bearing the Latin inscription Fidelitas ad finem, loyalty to the end. Alaric Voss stood quietly near the back of the room, arms crossed, pride softening the weathered lines of his face. Helena Karsten, her hair neatly tied back, her trench coat traded for a simple navy dress, captured every moment through her practiced lens. Not with a camera, but with the keen, unblinking observation of a true chronicler of history. Later that afternoon, Interpol issued an executive order. Effective immediately, all Aurumtech operations across Europe would be suspended pending exhaustive criminal investigation. Offices were raided, assets frozen, and high-ranking executives arrested or summoned to stand trial under charges ranging from human rights violations to conspiracy against international law. Dominic Strahl, once untouchable in his empire of steel and shadow, was apprehended in Zurich without incident. He surrendered without a fight, a small, cryptic smile playing across his lips as if he still clung to secrets no prison could contain. But the tide had turned. Meanwhile, in the echoing halls of the Berlin Press Guild, Helena stood before another sea of flashing lights and anxious anticipation. Clutched in her hands was the first printed copy of her investigation series, The Silent Corridors. 3 parts had been released over the course of 72 hours, each one blowing open a new aspect of Aurumtech's global network. Political bribes, military contracts, silent shareholders embedded in trusted NGOs. Her work was relentless, exacting, damning. Now, Helena was officially nominated for the European Liberty Prize for Investigative Journalism, the highest honor awarded to journalists exposing systemic corruption. The nomination alone catapulted her name across headlines and television broadcasts worldwide. For a woman once scorned by corporate media circles, today marked vindication carved into the bedrock of truth. Felix Morgenstern watched from the crowd, blending in with ease, his ever-messy hair tucked beneath a cap. His heart thrummed with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself in years: hope. Standing at Helena's side was Dr. Emily Brandt, now fully restored to her professional dignity. Freed from the shadows of Aurumtech's coercion, Emily had partnered with leading ethical researchers across Europe to found the Institute for Biomedical Integrity, a watchdog center dedicated to ensuring that no technology ever again crossed the lines Aurumtech had obliterated. She had swapped her worn black jackets for lighter, hopeful colors, today wearing a soft blue blazer over a pearl gray blouse. Her face was still drawn from stress, but her eyes burned with clear purpose. At a reception following the announcement, Helena found herself beside Leonhardt and Alaric, All three gathered near the open balcony overlooking Berlin's twilight skyline. Cerberus lay at Leonhardt's feet, basking in rare leisure. "You saved more than just a handful of lives," Helena said softly, raising a glass toward Leonhardt. "You may have saved the future." Leonhardt shrugged modestly, scratching behind Cerberus's ears. "The real hero's sitting at my feet," he replied. The dog thumped his tail once against the ground in agreement. Alaric lifted his own glass, his roughened voice carrying a rare warmth. "To loyalty, to courage, and to those who see what others refuse to see." They drank together as the city lights shimmered against the night, each of them carrying scars invisible to the cameras, sacrifices the world would never fully comprehend. Far beyond them, in forgotten corners of governments and corporations, those who had profited from the darkness now scrambled, exposed, and abandoned. But for now, for this brief, crystalline moment, the truth had prevailed. Cerberus stretched his long body, nosed gently against Leonhardt's hand, and gazed out over the city he had, in his own quiet way, helped save. Not with words, not with ambition, but with something older and stronger than either. Unwavering loyalty to the good that must be protected, no matter the cost. And somewhere, across the fractured maps and broken networks of a wounded world, a signal had gone out. The truth could not be buried forever. The spring sun rose soft and golden over Geneva, casting a warm sheen across the expansive courtyard of the European Academy for Security K9 units. A grand ceremony was underway, one unlike any other the Academy had hosted in its long-storied history. Officers, trainers, and dignitaries from across the continent lined the marble steps, their uniforms immaculate, medals gleaming, eyes turned toward the unlikely center of attention. A German shepherd whose loyalty had unveiled one of the greatest conspiracies of the modern era. Cerberus stood at perfect attention beside Leonhardt Weber, wearing a special harness fitted with a dark blue velvet sash embroidered in silver thread. The medallion that now hung from his collar was a unique creation, the International Honor for Animal Valor, a distinction never before awarded to a working dog for service at such a critical international level. A single word was etched beneath the medal's crest: Guardian. Leonhardt, tall and steady as a mountain, wore his formal Interpol uniform once more. His roughened features, sun-lined and marked by months of quiet war, softened as he knelt briefly to murmur in Cerberus's ear, "You earned this, old friend, more than any of us ever could." The crowd erupted into applause as Director Juliette Armand pinned the medal with practiced hands, offering Leonhardt a rare, genuine smile. "In a world obsessed with machines and algorithms," she said, voice carrying over the assembly, "it was the instincts of a dog and the faith of his handler that reminded us what true vigilance means." Beyond the rows of officers, Alaric Voss stood slightly apart, dressed once again in a sharply pressed pilot's uniform, the insignia of the European Aviation Safety Council newly added to his lapel. His pale blue eyes crinkled at the edges as he watched the ceremony, pride evident in his posture. Though Alaric had returned to commercial aviation, he had accepted a new role as an international aviation security advisor, lending his hard-won experience to protect civilian skies. It was a second career he hadn't asked for, but one that somehow felt inevitable, after all they had uncovered. After the ceremony, Leonhardt was ushered into a private hall where senior officials offered him a once-in-a-lifetime invitation to join the European K9 Academy as a master trainer. It would mean prestige, security, and a leadership role in shaping the next generation of K9 teams. Leonhardt listened respectfully to the offer, his square jaw set, his hand absently resting atop Cerberus's head. When they finished, he answered with the same unflinching honesty that had carried him through every trial. "I'm honored," he said, his voice quiet but unwavering. "But Cerberus and we belong in the field, among real people, not behind training walls." Director Armand nodded, not without disappointment, but with understanding. "Sometimes," she said, "the front line needs its best more than the classroom does." Thus, Leonhardt chose to return to his hometown in northern Germany, a modest city where cobblestone streets twisted between centuries-old buildings, and the scent of pine and earth perfumed the air after spring rain. He and Cerberus resumed their patrols, no longer under the crushing anonymity of routine, but now as protectors, carrying a weight that only the two of them could truly comprehend. Life returned, not to what it was, but to what it was meant to be. Meanwhile, Helena Karsten sat at the corner table of a sunlit cafe in Berlin, typing furiously on a battered old laptop, the smell of strong coffee and fresh pastries swirling in the air. The silent corridors expose had changed the trajectory of her life forever. She had not only survived the onslaught, but had risen, named one of Europe's top 10 investigative journalists, and now fielding offers from major outlets across the world. But Helena remained independent, tied not to power, but to truth. She wore her success lightly, the same sharp, determined glint in her green-gray eyes, the same unvarnished laugh when things went wrong, the same careworn leather jacket draped over her chair. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed. Leonhard Weber. "Cerberus misses your terrible jokes. Drop by if you're near." Helena smiled softly, typing back a simple reply. "On my way." Though separated by geography, she and Leonhard had remained connected, bound not by duty or career, but by survival. A quiet brotherhood forged in the fire of hidden wars. They exchanged sporadic messages, met for coffee when paths crossed, shared a wordless understanding that only those who had walked into darkness and returned could know. Dr. Emily Brandt, too, had built her new life atop the ashes of the old. Her Institute for Biomedical Integrity opened its doors 6 months after the scandal broke, a gleaming center of glass and light outside Hamburg. Its mission, to ensure that technology served humanity, never enslaved it. Emily, once haunted and hunted, now stood tall, her quiet dignity restored. She dedicated herself to mentoring young researchers, reminding them always that science without ethics was not advancement, but regression in disguise. On a breezy afternoon not long after the ceremony, Leonhardt and Cerberus walked the forest paths outside their hometown. No sirens, no hidden weapons, no men in dark suits lurking behind airport corridors. Just the song of birds, the distant rush of a brook, and the crunch of their footsteps through leaf litter. Cerberus trotted ahead, tail wagging with lazy contentment, occasionally pausing to sniff the breeze. His body, lean and powerful, moved with the ease of a creature who had earned every stride of peace he now enjoyed. Leonhardt watched him, a rare smile tugging at his lips. In the world beyond, technology advanced ever faster. Drones, algorithms, surveillance grids. But here, in the patient rhythm of nature, trust and loyalty still mattered more than any circuit. Cerberus, once just a name among dozens in a training registry, had become a symbol whispered across airports, command centers, newsrooms. Proof that even in a world intoxicated with speed and power, the oldest instincts still held the line. The boy with the dog, the man with the guardian. The truth wrapped in fur and fire and a heart that never once faltered. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, Leonhardt called out, "Come on, partner." And together they moved forward, two silhouettes against the endless green, carrying with them not the scars of what had been, but the hope of what still could be. And far away, across a changing world, there were those who remembered the name of the dog who had once defied silence and darkness. Cerberus, the loyal, the unbreakable, the watcher between worlds. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come wrapped in thunder or blinding light. Sometimes they come in the form of a loyal heart, a pair of watchful eyes, and a spirit that refuses to be broken. Cerberus reminded us that while technology grows faster than we can see, what truly protects us is something ancient: faithfulness, instinct, and the courage to stand firm in the storm. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was no accident that he was there at the right place, at the right time. Maybe it was a whisper from God himself, a reminder that even when the world feels overwhelmed by darkness, he sends his guardians in the most unexpected forms. In our everyday lives, we may not face conspiracies or grand dangers, but we do face moments where choosing integrity, loyalty, and vigilance matters. And when we choose to act with love, with courage, with faith, we too become part of that divine plan. We become everyday miracles for someone else. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that miracles walk among us, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4, please consider sharing this video, leaving a comment about the loyal companions in your own life, and subscribing to our channel for more stories of hope, courage, and grace. May God bless you, your family, and all those who walk faithfully by your side, and may He always send you a Cerberus when you need one most.